Russia has officially waged war on Ukraine, and I know a lot of you are wondering, how will this impact me as a first-time home buyer and even as just a home owner? How will this impact you? So I'm going to try to give you 3 things to think about during this time and 3 things I think you should be doing. I'm Shaheedah Hill, getting you over the hill to home ownership and helping you confidently buy your first home. So what does this mean for your wallet and you buying a house? So number 1 is higher energy prices. Because most of the European countries and also the United States is going to be imposing sanctions on Russia, and Russia, at least for Europe, is a big producer of energy, and that's going to cause oil prices to increase. So you could see, depending on what part of the country you live in, we could see gas prices as much as $5 to $6, depending on how far or how long this conflict lasts. So you want to be prepared that your energy prices are going to go up. Number 2, inflation. Inflation is already a major problem, and it could get even worse because as the cost of energy increases, a lot of the companies that depend on energy, if their costs increase, guess what? They're going to pass those costs on to the consumer, you and me. So everything that we buy can be even more expensive than it is already. So you have to get ready for even higher prices, not in just gas, but some of the things that you buy at the grocery store, at the retailer. Your prices in general can go up even further. And the Fed is aware, of course, of this inflation, and they're scheduled to meet in March, and they're going to increase the interest rate, and they may even have to be a little bit more aggressive, but they don't want to be too aggressive because that might get us into a recession. So they want to make sure that people are still willing to spend money, but they don't want to make it too high where people push back and stop spending money. So there's going to be a balance there that they're going to try to make when they make that interest rate decision. But the war could bring inflation even higher than it already is, okay? So I want you to be mindful of what's going to happen in March. Number 3, market turbulence, and I'm talking about the stock market. Investors do not like uncertainty. So you'll see a lot, even today, when all the news came out about what Russia was doing, the rocket attacks and that sort of thing, the market fell. And then when President Biden came back up, it kind of, okay, we know what's going to go on, and it rebounded toward the end of the day. So you just want to be mindful if you have investments, if you have a 401k, a Roth IRA, all of those investments, you just want to be mindful of them. Hopefully you're an investor, meaning for the long term, and you're not a trader. If you're a trader where you trade stocks every day, depending on what's happening in the market, you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to what's happening in the market. So you may want to talk to your financial advisor, especially if you're closer to retirement, that sort of thing, just in case, you make sure your stocks are going to be good and they're in the right places at this time. Now let's talk about what you can do. So those are the things I want you to be mindful of. Higher prices on energy, especially gas, inflation, prices going even higher, and how the Fed is going to react to that, the Federal Reserve. And then 3, just market turbulence in the stock market that can impact your investment. Now that you know what could happen, let's talk about what you should be mindful of as a first-time home buyer. Now, interest rates, they may just continue to go up. Depending on what the Fed does in March, it may be a little bit more drastic than originally anticipated or expected. So I want you to be in very close communication with your lender about your rate and your rate lock options. Lenders get rate sheets every single day, and depending on what's happening in the market, that rate changes every single day, if not multiple times a day. So you really want to make sure that you're in communication about what your rate is and what you're expecting your rate to be. And then you want to discuss any rate lock options, because if you have not locked your rate or you're not under contract yet, your rate is floating, and it's floating with the market. So it could go up one day, down a day, up a day, down a day. So you really want to talk to your lender about, when can I lock my rate? How long can I lock it? What happens if interest rates drop? Can I unlock it and relock it? A lot of lenders have those options, but they may charge you a fee for it. You want to be very knowledgeable about your lender and how their rate options work. Number two, you have to start controlling your economy, because we can't control what's happening in Ukraine. We can't control what's happening in Russia, but you can control what's happening in your home, your economy, your budget. You may need to pull back on some of your discretionary spending and really make sure you're paying attention to the money that you're spending. When things go up in price, do you just pay the higher price, or do you adjust your spending to make up for it? Do you pull back on some of your wants and really focus on your needs? You want to make sure that you have a very healthy emergency fund. You want to make sure that you have, you're not just spending wildly, because if our economy does soften, you want to make sure your home is taken care of. So you want to be very cautious to make sure you're not spending outside of your means and really making smart money decisions at this time, because we may be in a time of uncertainty. Now, if you're in the market for a house, the higher interest rates go, the more people are probably going to leave the market, because of affordability, they can't afford to buy a home. Not only are homes higher in price, but they're also more expensive due to the interest rate. So the cost to borrow the money is even more. So you may have some people who cannot afford, with the higher cost and the higher interest rates, to buy a home. Mortgage applications have already decreased as mortgage rates started to rise, earlier this month. So it may not mean lower prices though, because inventory is still super low. So as a home owner, you may be rethinking selling your home, because you're going to be in the same position as some of those buyers paying those higher interest rates after you sell. So you want to just really be very cautious about your decision to buy if it's going to be outside of your budget, right? So you want to make sure, even with the higher interest rate, you're still able to afford that mortgage payment. And my recommendation has always been not to spend more than 30% of your take-home pay. So if you're getting outside of that, you may need to, you can still buy, but you may need to change the location, change the area, change your price point. Because if you were qualified for $350 and that was at 3.5%, your qualification and your budget should change if now that the interest rates are 4% or 4.25%. Now, are you still at the 350, or have you moved down to 300,000? And that 300,000, depending on your market, may have you living in another area. So then you have to readjust and plan for that reduction in purchasing power. Okay. But it also could be less competition. So even if inventory continues to be low, people will leave the market, and it may not be as aggressive come spring, depending on how aggressive the Fed is with raising interest rates, where instead of 10 people, 20 people bidding on a house, maybe it'll be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We won't know for sure until I think we get into March and April exactly how the market will be. But it could be less competitive, and sellers can be more favorable to buyers depending on how many buyers they have trying to buy their house. I hope this was helpful. I will keep you updated if I think anything is really changing as far as the housing market significantly and how you should react to it. But definitely be paying attention, because things in Ukraine and Russia and Europe do impact us here in the United States.